Huh? Not 100%.
Hi, everyone. We're just getting a few of the details worked out on the back end before we start here. Let's see.
Where's the link?
Let's see here. Okay, so good evening, everybody. My name is Nathan Lynch, and I'm the chair of the glass program and the ceramic program. And my job, first of all, is to let you know that we're recording this. So if you don't want to be recorded, now's your chance to turn off your video and replace your name with something that says CCA Magic Hour. So you can go ahead and do that now. Welcome to tonight's BFA Thesis Conversation. This is something that we started during the early days of the pandemic last year to provide a chance for students to show their work and have a kind of community gathering and conversation outside of having an in-person reception. And we had such a good experience with it that we decided to continue even though the shows are back in real life now. So we have 4 artists that are going to present tonight, and we have they'll talk for about 10 minutes, and then we have a respondent with us, another artist named Welly Fletcher, who is an MFA alum from 2010 and is now an assistant professor at the University of New Mexico. So Welly's here, and she's going to give the students some feedback. If you all have things you want to add, you're welcome to do that in the chat at the bottom of the page. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead with the Cca Land Acknowledgement, which I'm going to read now, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So, California College of the Arts campuses are located on Huichin and Yelamu, also known as Oakland and San Francisco, respectively, on the unceded territories of Chochenyo and Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who have continuously lived on this land since time immemorial. We recognize the historic discrimination and violence inflicted upon Indigenous peoples in California and the Americas, including their forced removal from ancestral lands and the deliberate and systematic destruction of their communities and culture. CCA honors Indigenous peoples past, present, and future here and around the world, and we wish to pay respect to local elders, including those of the lands from which you are joining us virtually. If you are unsure of whose land you are currently residing upon, we encourage you to visit native-land.ca. All right. Lastly, I'm going to look, before we get started here, I just want to look through our guests. I think Nate Watson is on here. I just want to acknowledge Nate. Nate is one of the glass faculty who worked with all these students at one point and hosted them this year at Public Glass, and has been just a great mentor for the students. I'm not sure if Clifford is on here right now because he had a time conflict, but Clifford also worked with the students in Glass 3, and as many of you know, is a great mentor to our students. So Carly's going to go first. Before I turn the screen over to Carly, the last thing I'll say is that that I'm very proud of you all, and I appreciate both your kind of courage and your professionalism in the last couple of years. You know, everybody's had a hard time, but you, for artists of the population at CCA, you have had an additionally difficult time because we shut down the furnace this year, which was a disappointment to all of us, but impacted you the most. And while we don't need to get into the weeds on that, I just want to say out loud and publicly that that was a hardship for you all. And I appreciate that when the moments came where you needed to advocate for yourselves, you kept a very, I don't know, polite and professional tone. And I think that kind of attitude and professionalism is really it's gonna serve you well in your life as artists and people. So thanks to you all for that good attitude and your hard work. And we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm looking this way because I have new guests in the room here. Carly Murakami, you're up first. I'm really looking forward to seeing your work. And I'll say a little bit more at the end of the night about your show. Go ahead, Carly.
Okay, thanks. So hello, I'm Carly Murakami. I am a GLASS BFA candidate with a minor in the history of art and visual culture. So let me start off with my roots. I am born and raised from the island of Oahu, Hawaii, and I am so grateful to know that this is my home. This is a video of the Ko'olau Mountains in a garden called Ho'omaluhia, which is one among the long list of places I go to when I am home. So I'd say the start of my artistic and creative drive arrived when I was younger. I don't remember what particularly drew me to drawing, but I would always love to doodle. I remember drawing on these scrap pieces of paper that wasn't even like nice paper I should keep, but I just drew on anything I could get my hands on. So to the right is an image of a homework assignment I did when I was 7 years old. And the assignment was about rules. And on the without rules side, it reads, without rules, people will kidnap puppies and dogs from the shelter. Police officers will not get the kidnappers. And on the side with rules, it reads, with rules at the pet shelter, people will get to buy dogs and puppies because no one kidnapped them. On the drawing I made, you can read the teacher's magenta writing that says, you are an artist, which obviously fueled my drive even more. I feel like I was always highly supported in my creative hobbies and interests, and I remember enrolling in my first art class somewhere around 4th grade. The smaller picture to the left is me with my very cute dog that I named Poochie Wow Wow. So these images are from senior year in high school. To the left is an image of a print I created from a solarized plate. It pictures a woman adorned with leaves on her head and burns on her body. This was a series I made to recognize Hawaiian beauty, and the image is from a photograph I took with a fern stamp printed on the model's body that I cut out myself. To the right is a glass panel that was also made in my senior year of high school, where I was exploring sandblasting glass to create more dimension in an image. And this is the awapuhi, also known as the ginger. These images remind me of the type of work I came from, very two-dimensional, and I feel a great sense of becoming through my time at CCA as a glass major, trying to pursue sculpture, which was pretty out of my comfort zone. So here are some inspirations for my artwork. The first being Hula. Hula was a huge part of my life when I was younger. I started at a very young age, and it holds a special place in my heart, to say the least. I'm actually in the picture on the right in the very, very back, but this is from a competition called Merry Monarch. And Merry Monarch is a highly prestigious hula competition that I had dedicated my blood, sweat, and tears to as my main passion before fully realizing that I wanted to become an artist. To the right is a book called Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers. It is special because it is written fully in Hawaiian Pidgin and is one of my favorite novels. There is a beautiful and slightly sad nostalgia that comes with reading it, but overall the language is a huge source of inspiration to me. I feel as though when I am reading, I can fall in love with a pair of words or a group of words, and I want to create a piece that helps me manifest what it is about these words that I find so impressionable. Wow. So Ruth Asawa is a huge inspiration to me. Besides her beautiful story of perseverance, she is a very admirable maker. not only to the fact that she's a well-known Japanese-American artist, but I think that Asawa's repetitive and delicate nature of her wire forms emit a full control and patience that I revere. I'm highly intrigued by the internal and external spaces her forms create, along with its negative spaces and weightlessness. So I'm going to quickly go through some of my past work now, starting with this first drawing from 2019. That was from my advanced glass class. And it was a semester where all the enrolled in the class would have to participate with 15 autobiographical drawings. And I'm going to show 2 here out of the 15 that I particularly liked. And so this first here depicts multiple portraits of myself layered one over the other, and is titled Condensed Time. These included 3 self-portraits of myself, and this made me very comfortable with self-portraiture in general, having to compartmentalize each layer of the image. This second image is a portrait of my great-grandpa, and his name was Daniel Hanaoka. I considered putting these here just to emphasize how much drawing has become a part of my practice, including memorializing the people or things that I want to keep in an everlasting image in my mind. So fast forwarding all the way to last semester, this piece was something I made a smaller mock-up of that I morphed slowly into one of the glass pieces I will be using for my BFA show. The first iteration of glass as protector became these glass arms that were reaching out to hold and lift this baby up and off of the ground. I have always considered glass blowing to be not as big of a part as my process as I would like it to be. And so I feel that this was a nice step to begin a piece where the only glass elements in it were glass blown by hand. So iterations have become a huge part of my creating process. This leads me to another form of my practice, which is having full control of the way I document my pieces or want them to be perceived. This photo in particular was one I was very intrigued and pleased with because it meshed both in my love of self-portraiture in photography, as well as my sculptural glass elements in it as well. So this is the glass casting process. Most of my pieces for my BFA show have been made this way. The process I have grown to love the most is definitely the glass casting process. It is time consuming and does not give such an immediate result like glass blowing does. And all of the glass pieces in my upcoming BFA show were kiln formed. So from left to right and top to bottom, these are the photos that show the multiple steps it takes to create a glass casting. First, I start off with the clay sculpted positive. I produce a final mold. Over that to create a wax positive, which will then allow me to create another mold over that. And the image on the top right shows the wax positive right before it is ready to have the final mold be poured over it. And the red things attached to it are called sprues. And this allows me to like vent my glass so that I don't get any weird air bubbles in my castings. And then I pour in the final mold material. And once I get that mold, I need to steam out the wax. So the bottom left is the molds with the wax fully steamed out. I need to let them dry for 2 weeks after that. And then I can fill those same molds with glass shards. We call it cullet. And they will basically be put into a kiln and programmed for a cycle that I had created or written myself. And once the cycle is done, I can divest and wash my glass babies basically so that I can cold work them, which is cutting, grinding, and polishing the glass. So this brings me to my current work I have been patiently creating for my BFA show upcoming this weekend on May 7th. This piece in particular holds a special place in my heart because inside the void of each of these forms will be items or objects I feel that I cannot identify without. This next piece is a slump sheet of 5/8 of an inch thick glass. This was a true test of me stepping out of my comfort zone because I bought a handheld tile saw and I just went to town cutting this huge slab of glass down to an 18 by 18 square basically. The slight hue of the glass is a nice touch because I don't typically use a lot of color within my work, but it allowed the raised ring to be the most dense and rich in color. Another one of my pieces I have been working on for my upcoming show is this casted baby fetus. I was so excited to see all the details that came out in the work, since it was very easy to lose the tiny parts of the figure that could easily be broken, such as like a little finger or a little foot. And this is another image of a casting I have done to test my technical abilities to cast difficult objects. But basically looking towards the future at what's next. Once school is finished, I do plan on continuing to work full-time at a glass studio called John Lewis Glass, and it's a casting production studio in Oakland, California. I feel incredibly supported by my coworkers and boss at this company, and I'm excited to see what more I can learn to help me carry on to my personal art practice. I will continue to create on my own time while applying to as many residencies I can to pursue a life of creation. So finally, I would like to thank everyone for coming to listen to my BFA conversation. I would also like to appreciate my friends and family for the endless support, with a big emphasis on both the family and friends I have in Hawaii as well as the Bay Area. I want to especially thank the artists, also known as faculty, I have met here at CCA that have shaped my emerging artist brain to help equip me with the tools I will use to progress into the future. So I am so blessed and grateful, and mahalo for your time.
Oh, Maria, will you do me a favor? Thanks, Carly. That was great. I was actually laughing out loud when you said the artists also known as faculty. Welly, I'm gonna not to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna let you begin the conversation here, I think. And then
Great. Carly, thanks so much. Congratulations. That's such a beautiful body of work to come out of a BFA with. I am struck at just your presentation showing the early drawings and how drawing pretty much seems like it's a source of a lot of the work. And the drawing is highly representational. And then it seems like your glass work is almost leading that way now, but there's a lot of abstraction in the repeated forms. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to that relationship between representation and abstraction. And also a side note of, I'd love to hear the relationship of drawing with your work kind of ongoing as well.
Yeah, so basically when I first started school here, I just had my little brain in a box and was like, if I represent things as they're seen, it's the best way to do it. And so I just thought that drawing in this hyper realistic way, or like depicting things the same exact way that I saw them in real life, was just the way that I should do it, because it was the way that pleased me the most. But when I started to do a bit more figurative work throughout my first few years at school here, I realized that, you know, as beautiful as I like the real representations, I've never tried to hide some parts of what I'm trying to say by using a little bit of abstraction or a little bit more of like something that would leave an open-ended answer more than just seeing it when you see the piece itself. And I think that all of my drawings pretty much started off figuratively that way. And actually, as the drawings morphed, the work morphed. So to go with the drawings along with the pieces, I feel like I was trying to draw things that weren't real in real life yet, that I hadn't conceived in a physical form. And once I started to draw a little bit more abstract, I guess you could say, in a way, or just freely, I had realized that what I drew informed exactly the things that I wanted to try to make, especially because my process is so long. So drawing has been pretty embedded within both the curriculum as an advanced class student here, as well as just something I want to carry on to my own practice.
And have you seen Ruth Asawa's drawings of, I mean, just so tied with those forms, those abstract forms? And one of the things I find so powerful about abstraction is, you know, it is rooted in representation, but it's like pulled away, you know. And the way you spoke, one of your inspiration images was the book along with the hula that you had to the side. And you talked some about like language and the kind of poetics that came out of that as being an inspiration. And that I was thinking of that as you showed your images, like the representation with abstraction and sort of comprehension or reference, and how that does leave space when you just don't articulate it exactly. So it's kind of photorealistic. And it's what I love often in artworks, is the poetics that kind of come and give me a place for my own imagination. So that was really fun. And I really was wondering, if you don't mind, why glass? You know, the physicality that you were kind of I won't say pro, but that you were pretty advanced in your hula practice. It makes sense to me. I mean, glass is such a physical process that kind of sculpturally would need a place in your life. But I'm curious, kind of that moment when you were like, no, I want to commit to this. What was that like, and what was the attraction?
So actually, it's really funny because I never actually thought that I would come to college to become a glass major. I had actually taken a glass class when I was in high school, and I had that sandblasted panel that was like my first step into glass. But my first semester here, I ended up taking cold working, and I was just like, oh wow, like I was never really interested in glass blowing in particular, because it was something that I couldn't think too much for it during the process. It was something that kind of had to be calculated before, unless you had a lot of time doing this same motion, so you had an inherent ability to do so. When I started to really fall in love with it was when I realized that this material that constantly surrounds everyone every day, everywhere, could be manipulated to do exactly what I told it to do. I was like, whoa, that's some power right there. And it really made me feel that it was extraordinary, even though it's not something impossible to do.
Awesome. Thanks for that answer. Yeah. Do you ever find, you showed these beautiful like glass and drawings, and then there was one piece where there was more, you'd said like wood and plaster, and then there was that kind of repeated form of the baby figure that was in that kind of initial piece, and then later. And I guess I was just curious to know if other materials sometimes, did we just not see those, or other materials find their way into your installations as well sometimes?
Yeah, I actually have been focusing a lot on this like weird phrase of words I've been using, like glass as protector. And or just like, I used to also say this thing like, you are best hidden in a glass box, which is like, why? Glass is clear, it's fragile. Why would you want to protect yourself with something like this? But then I started to realize that the material itself was allowing me to protect myself, because this is the forefront of like my image that I'm putting forward is my glass. This is like what I'm truly using for people to think about me with, instead of meeting me personally. And to go along with that, some of the materials that I use that are not glass would be like plaster, for example, which is very different. It's opaque, it's like kind of chalky, it's delicate too, but it's also, once it's cast, it's cast. You can't really like go back or do anything with it. And I feel like the process with plaster is very similar to glass as well. But also with glass, just the look of it, I've been using rusted metals in some of my work as well, like rusted nails. I've been rusting finishing nails and using them in my installation as well. And so just that contrast between a metal corroding with all of this really bright reds and oranges in it, like had such a beautiful contrast to this material that is just shining and sparkling and clear, and it will never rust basically.
That's such a poetic answer, the title of the work. And I'm just thinking about also the self-portraiture that you started with, and glass is also like something we think of the looking glass and sort of reflecting back, but you're using its transparency, like you don't have to, but you are, that would also, instead of seeing something reflected, you're seeing through, you know, so, to something more clearly. I love the idea of protection being vulnerable, and sort of having fragility. It feels really pertinent to the times we're living in right now, of like what is strength and what is vulnerability, and kind of using this, just a really nice way to use a title to, you know, to sort of get us thinking about vulnerability and protection and shielding and armor, you know, but having that material sort of speak through its own voice in your work. It's really wonderful. What a great show. I wish I could go to the show.
Thank you.
Are those nails in the show that people will go to? Ah, cool. Wonderful.
Hey, Carly, can you take us back to can you share your screen again, just so we can look at some of those works again that Welly was referencing?
Oh yeah. So going back a little bit. So this is the baby that will be with the rusted nails in the show, but some of the other works we were talking about were like, this is the photographic process, and the iteration before that also has the baby in it.
So can I ask, was this kind of like your first edition of that work, and then the photograph is where you've landed now? Is that right?
Yeah, so this was the first sort of iteration, and then when I went to document it, this is sort of the piece, I guess, that came out of it, and then it morphed into becoming the blue baby at the end.
Huh. I want to really compliment you on that step from the cast baby to from the plaster baby to this step, and thinking about the photograph as a finished piece, but also because just formally there's like a big distance between the glass tubes and the plaster baby that seems, I don't know, maybe obvious, but when you but with the fingers, because they're formally kind of similar to these other tendrils, that relationship between the abstract and the representational is a little bit closer together, and seems to make better. It's not quite as dissonant between them, and I think that your kind of openness to looking at the photograph as a finished work is a good sign. Like that kind of flexibility and nimble thinking, I think, is something that will really serve you well as you move out in the world. You know, I'm thrilled that you were able to work for John Lewis and maybe have access to resources there, but there'll be times when you don't have the same resources to work with. So anyway, it's exciting to see how you're able to sort of think on the fly in terms of what's process and what's finished work.
And I just want to name like this theme of sort of, or actually like a tool of repetition that you're using in all the work. And I recognized in the drawings, you have a lot of repetitive mark making as well. Like there's hatch marks, there's, and that is, you know, casting lends itself to that so beautifully. You know, that's one of its reasons, one of its purposes. But you're really, I also see Ruth Asawa in that kind of repetition, and in each of the pieces, that's such a powerful tool you're using. And I really loved seeing that slumped glass, like as a contrast. That was can you go to that picture?
Yeah.
Just a really beautiful way of saying, you know, not always, you know, just it sort of expanding the range of your approach. Then this kind of gives this like respite. It's really singular. It's, you know, it's got a little translucency. This is another one. Is that on a pedestal? And then I would look down through a hole and is there a light inside?
Exactly. You got it.
Well, I mean, you documented it well. And so that's why I get it, which is what, you know, great documentation. And I love that kind of thickness of this piece too, this sort of planar thickness. So it's just a really, when showing like a range of, you know, you get a chance to show the work like you did today, having those kind of showing your breadth, but still having it be cohesive it looks really wonderful. And I want to congratulate you on all the work. It's really exciting.
Thank you.
Have a great show too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carly. Well done. So I will keep us moving along here. Hana, Dvorak, you're going to be next. I'm going to take this off quickly. So for those of you that don't know Hana, she is a double major. So last year during the stay-at-home portion of our pandemic, Hana did this all for her ceramics degree. And I'll say one thing, I can see your strength growing and growing all the time, Hana. And that's not a small comment, because the first week Hana was in school here, she stood on the front lawn and did a backflip in front of me. So I knew it was going to be an exciting 4 or 5 years. Anyway, thank you, Hana, for staying with us to complete your second degree. It's really been a pleasure to work with you. And I'm going to hand the screen over to you.
Thanks, Nathan. Okay, well, as Nathan said, this is my glass conversation on my show Play Place. I'm Hana Dvorak. So I wanted to start off with my artist statement. I'm taking the world I want to live in from my imagination to real life. My inner world started from my childhood drawings and summer craft projects. Curious creatures fill in my mind and beg to come out and play. I craft to let everyone engage with these friendly, lovable critters. Seeing my soft shapes and bright colors draws people into the world of childhood. Kids from toddlers to preteens exhibit unrestrained happiness. As we become adults, we are expected to restrain our emotions. Silly things that used to make us smile are written off as immature. My dragons and whimsical creatures lift that restraint. Whether you're an adult or a kid, they spark that childish smile of happiness across one's face. What could be better than sculptural toy-like artwork to let children and adults interact with fine art? My inviting cartoon style brings viewers into a state of ease, like watching a favorite childhood cartoon on Saturday morning. The comfort of being around these pieces is so great that they want to touch the artwork. While standing in a museum, all anyone hears is look but don't touch. I will not stand for that. Art is to be enjoyed. Therefore, not only can my pieces be touched, but my largest pieces formed from wonderful materials and fine art forms are also huggable. So a few influences before we get into the work. Mark Ryden's pop surrealist creatures, I think, are really awesome and funky. I love them. Jason Freeney's use of toys in making things that are a little odd, but still recognizable. And then, of course, Christina Bothwell's use of ceramic and glass, like huge inspiration. I didn't know about her work till freshman year of college, and it pretty much started me wanting to be a double major. Here's a few pieces from the beginning of school. One of them is this tea set that was designed with children in mind. They're fairly spill-proof set to let kids interact with ceramic. They're also of a small size so that it's built for children's hands and the scale of the work so that it could be playable. And then this piece was actually from my first semester at CCA. It's the first large-scale sculpture I made. And the fact that everyone couldn't stop petting it and hugging it during crit started this complete obsession with interactive work that's gone for the 5 years. Okay, now into Play Place, which is the show I did for this year. I started off with some rules. When you entered the space, this is the first thing you saw, because really this whole show was an experiment to see for myself how much I could make these materials interactive. I hope to get rid of most of these rules in the future because it worked better than I expected. Right when you enter the space, you're greeted by this wonderful creature, Girelephant. So I'm going to take you way back to when I was 4 years old. I did this drawing on the right that you can see here. And during junior year at CCA, I got really stuck and I didn't know what to make. And this thing was like laying on the floor in the corner, abandoned. And I was like, well, why don't I just try making this thing? Like, what will it look like in my style as an adult-ish human being making it now? And I made him and I really liked him. So then another one of him appeared this year out of nowhere. This one is decided he wanted to leave the paper and the wall and just like explode out to play with you and join whatever's happening already in the space. So this was the next thing you would have walked through as you were making your way. Then you could have made a stop over at this piece where I did not contribute any drawing to it. It started off this way, and then people were allowed to draw wherever, whatever they wanted on this piece. Each one of those pens is on a string that's extendable so that they could have an experience where they could make art in the space themselves and feel some of that joy that I feel making all these pieces. This is a bit of a self-portrait. I love the dragon symbol. I use it as my personal symbol for myself, but a little while ago, someone, I don't know if they were confused or what, but they described me as a triceratops. So my brain, of course, went, oh, it's a triceradragon. That should be my new personal symbol. So this dude appeared. Everyone asked me about the Band-Aid. There's a very simple answer to the Band-Aid. He had a boo-boo coming out of the kiln the second time, so he needed help. So I grabbed a Band-Aid. End of story. There was nothing else to it. He had a boo-boo. This was made last year during a lot of like political things happening, which I do not make political artwork. You won't find me making political artwork, but there was so much happening with postal service and the elections and stuff that some of the real world leaked into my fantasy world of fairies and trolls and unicorns and dragons. And I made this piece. I thought it was great, but really I just made it because I wanted to make snail mail with Slow the Slug. I just thought it was hilarious, personally. This is based off of a stuffed animal I had as a kid. And this one, I was working with satin glazes and underglazes on ceramic to play with the textures and tactile like experience of the work. And Teddy, the unicorn. Okay, now the glass, the exciting part. I've really started to get into glass casting. It's still quite a daunting task to me, but I love it because I can make things like this that are able to be played with and pretty sturdy. So I made 2 sets of these alphabet blocks and they were out for people to play with. I saw people stacking them. I saw people spelling with them and they were totally fine. Yeah, the only complaint I got was the alphabet doesn't have enough vowels and I didn't take account for it. So future note. The other glass pieces I had 2 sets of these cast glass ring sets. The stands are wood, they're not glass. But otherwise they're glass, and these were really awesome to see people interact with because not only did they stack them on here, but they played in other ways. And it was fun to watch people have this experience of picking them up and realizing how heavy they were and how much of a like task it was to move them around, unlike the normal plastic one. And the best part to me was watching an 11-month-old think that this was the best thing ever because he recognized this and he actually attempted to play with it. He just couldn't pick them up because they were too heavy. And then when you got to the very back of the space, you met my friend, the giant troll, who's very huggable, and he was fluffy. I loved the interaction people had with him because from the 11-month-old to a 5-year-old, they could kind of go up to him and hug him. But from 5 years old to 90 years old, people had to get down on the play mats as they were a kid and give him a big hug. And that was fun to watch. So this was the main back installation of glass for everyone who didn't get to see it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much to many artists, teachers, family, friends. So many people helped me with this.
Thanks, Hana. You can go ahead. Let's leave your presentation up in case we want to refer back to it. We could.
Okay.
That's because sometimes people want to talk about specific works.
So awesome. Thank you for that presentation. I can you pull up that the rainbow ring of, this is so exciting. I would love to feel these in person and talk about representation and abstraction in a really powerful way of harnessing that. This is so hyper representational, like even, you know, the youngest kid is recognizing that, right? But then the abstraction is just purely in the materiality. And that shift of our expectation from what's happening is super exciting. And there was no scale shift too, right? It's like exactly to scale or ish.
Close enough. Technically, there's a tiny scale shift between all of those stages that Carly nicely explained for us. It's the same process, but basically the same.
Yeah, really wonderful. This piece reminded me of, do you know the furniture-ish artist Gord Peterin? I saw he had a 2-person show with Donald Fortescue when I was in town, and he makes these wonderful sort of ways of interacting with the work that like have a felt table, and then that would be on there just to sort of cue people into how they're supposed to engage through the form itself instead of a sign that says, you know, it's okay to touch. And I feel like that is such a powerful part of your practice, is even just to think of the retractable pen, like to go through finding that exact solution. And I could tell exactly that that's an invitation. I don't need any reassurance about it because you've incorporated that invitation into the form. And I think kind of throughout, that is such a powerful sort of answer to your artist statement / manifesto. I feel like your artist statement is really verging on just like, this is truly what matters to me, you know, and this is why. So I was really struck by that. And I wanted to make a note that I think that is political, you know, it's not like politics in the news, but inviting and being that adamant about engagement being fundamental to the work. That's not every artist, obviously, you know, and your kind of commitment to that is a political act also, even though you do it with like humor and fun and color and softness, you know, just to kind of reassert that actually, I see that as pretty strongly political. I was hoping you might, if you don't mind, going to the Teddy image. I know this is in the ceramic section, but the actual coat of that unicorn and the fact you sort of said you did underglazes, I would love to hear more about the process of ending with this result, because to me, to end up with that kind of sheen and like that must have taken a pretty intense amount of experimentation. I was wondering if you could kind of walk us through, or maybe not, maybe lucky accident.
It's actually, the white is a satin glaze, and then the purple colored parts are different underglazes. but without a glaze over the top of them. And so I like using satin glazes because they're inviting to touch. They don't seem like the glossy glass, which I also like about glass casting, is it doesn't end up with that shiny, like glossy, sterile kind of look. But I also left a bunch of underglaze, all of the colors done without anything on top of it, so that you have that really like matte finish that's very almost velvety. I mean, they're usually referred to as velvet underglazes. And so, yeah, that mixing of them I thought was interesting because usually people will cover them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really struck, I mean, just from seeing your work for the first time, of the pieces that you like in feeling a little lost to go find when you felt found with this drawing that you've held on to for so many years. And then with your adult-ish self, I love that phrase, remake that with the skills. And I think that's, to me, that's like what your work does, right? It allows us as adults to like, it gives us the craft that allows us then to more deeply appreciate and look at and spend time with something that is totally about joy and invention. And that's just really embedded in your practice. So thank you for that. Really, congratulations on such a great body of work. Thank
you.
Hana, this was a real breakthrough for you, the girelephant. And
Totally.
if our audience has not looked at the caption here, I want you all to just try and spell the word girelephant. You can put it in the caption or just write it on a napkin nearby, and send those to Hana. How do you spell girelephant? And I wrote this in the chat, Hana, but the Band-Aid solution to a crack is really the best. That's the best ceramics thing I've heard in years, because it's usually a problem, and that turned out to be a brilliant solution. So, you know, some of this work is from last year, but I see you, like you've come a long way even since last year in your development, partly in the work itself, but also in the way that you're thinking about it or talking about it. It's almost like you got to finish the show. Like the show last year didn't feel quite resolved, quite finished. Not just of the sculptures themselves, but what the body of work was about. And now you can really see like the confidence and strength of your sense of humor come through. That's not accidental. That's not, that is at the core of your work.
True.
Like Relevant was one thing, but then can you take us down a couple more images, like to see that come again? And I think that the Band-Aid is really when it shows up again with the most force, but we get your sense of humor. And I really appreciate Welly pointing out that engagement is political, and to assert that kind of, that is an act in itself. So anyway, thank you, Hana, for bringing so much to the studios. I think the other thing I want to just mention is what a good citizen you are in terms of your colleagues and the studio space. And I don't know, it's just been such a pleasure to have you here, and I'm proud of this work that you've done. So congratulations.
Thank you, Nathan.
I have one more kudo though. Can
Yeah.
I just, as I'm sitting here, can I say one more thing? I'm really struck by, you know, your sort of manifesto artist statement about interactivity and joy, really. But I really think that your artwork also, by demonstrating and the invitation being clear, and even incorporating the picture you drew with the sculpture, there's a teaching and a permission. You know, we're in a culture now that has a pretty low literacy around art. You know, it's being cut. And so you're showing adults too how this translates, how this continues, how this sort of direct connect between an artwork that's in a fine art gallery that's made of materials no one can imagine how it's made if they aren't in the ceramic studio or the glass studio, with this drawing. And I think that that's also a really exciting kind of bridge that you're building through your practice is sort of as a demonstrator, teacher, modeler of, of not having to get all serious about it, but just getting a little more serious about it, with your skills. So really bravo for that too.
Thank you so much.
All right. Last thing, I think that foam floor worked really well. I didn't have a chance to tell you that, but that was a great move. Okay, thanks, Hana. We're going to move on to Tony Hughes, and Tony is also in the show that's happening that opens Saturday with Carly and Cheyenne, who will be our closer. And Tony, it's been a pleasure to know you, and I know you've had a lot of extra things this year, and I just want to take a moment to congratulate Tony because he's a new father. His son Huey is like 4 weeks old.
Yep,
and
4 weeks.
We know that you're an artist, Tony, because you took Huey to the gallery yesterday to help you install. So I'm sure you got a good life coming ahead of you with Huey. And make sure to thank your partner several times tonight. And we're looking forward to seeing your show on Saturday. So I'm going to hand the screen over to you, and you can take it away.
Excellent. All right, can y'all see my screen? Well, thank you so much, Nathan, for the lovely introduction. My name is Tony Hughes, and welcome to my BFA conversation. I grew up in the South Bay area in a little town called Mountain View, California, which is located at the base of the Santa Cruz Mountains and in between the mountains and the San Francisco Baylands. As a young kid, I developed a deep appreciation for nature. I was able to spend a lot of time in the redwood forests, frolicking around and camping. This is a picture of me working at my home studio. When I was little, I was diagnosed with pervasive developmental disorder. This is a series of disorders that are characterized by delays in socialization and communication skills. This being my case, I grew intolerant towards social interaction and social institutions, much like education, and I looked for other avenues of acquiring knowledge. One of my main inspirations was my father. He acquired his master's in sculpture at San Jose State in 1979, and a year later, he built a small hot shop in his backyard. I was introduced with the craft of blowing glass at a very young age, and I grew up watching him work on many things, but what I was intrigued the most with was witnessing the unique attributes of molten glass. Another one of my influences is Anselm Kiefer. He is a German artist who works in many different mediums, but he has expansive artistic success in his paintings and his sculpture. Fusing art and literature, painting and sculpture, Kiefer engages the complex events of history and the ancestral epics of life, death, and the cosmos. Another one of my influences is Giuseppe Penone, who is an Italian artist and sculptor. He's known for his large-scale sculptures of trees that are interested in the link between man and the natural world. I find myself intrigued with Penone's work because I feel that I can relate my own thoughts to what his work is about. Another influence of mine is Anthony Gormley. He's a British sculptor, and in particular, his work, Another Place, is an outdoor installation where he casted his own body, turned it into iron, and placed many figures on the beach in England, on a beach in England. And this piece intrigues me because it interacts with the natural world. Specifically in this photo, you see these bodies on the coastline, and when the tides change, they become submerged in the water, and then when the tide goes away, they become exposed. So I'm going to go into a little bit of my earlier work. This work in particular was a very big transformation for me. I view my work going in two different directions. One towards exploring the history of humankind and the destructive consequences that have taken place due to human influence. The other direction is trying to figure out the similarities between humanity and the natural world. Because I believe we as a species have the tendency to put ourselves on a pedestal, which causes us to take for granted what this world has to offer. This is bewildering to me, because aren't we a part of the natural world? Somewhere along the way, we lost our connection and respect for nature and thus ourselves. Another iteration of the same series, this multi-layered piece is a representation of humanity as an industrial figure. Yet the head is made into 4 parts that depicts similar characteristics of the shell of a seed. This piece is also a play on the phrase planting a seed in someone's mind, which is shown by the fountain acorn inside the mind of the figure. I recently read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which was the book that kind of kicked off the environmental conscious movement. This book solidified all that I've been thinking about. I was immediately influenced to say something towards the destructiveness of human behavior. Whilst reading the book, I pictured a shriveled sprout that was frozen in time, perchless, lifeless, and sad. This work branched out into becoming a larger scale installation that you will later see. This piece called Figure Grafting, it serves as a reflection of the similarities we as humans share with other forms of organic life. Organic column came about based on a study that I did on Greek columns. I found it fascinating that ancient Greeks wanted to reflect the forms of nature within their columns, which held up important societal landmarks. So this was an attempt for me to create something that captured that, much like going back in time. Oh, I'm sorry. People always ask me, how do you make that? So I thought I would give a quick depiction on how I make glass casted objects. So backing up just a little bit, I come from a very heavy blowing background, and the fact that I came to CCA and discovered glass casting, my mind was blown, and I immediately was intrigued by learning a new technique of working with the same material. So when casting glass, I start out with a wax positive that gets invested into a plaster and silica mold. Once the mold is made and the wax is melted out, it is filled with broken glass. And once you have that going, the kiln is fired, and your glass turns into the positive object of once your wax used to be. This piece is titled Scorched Leg. Glass casting is a great technique to achieve scale, intricate detail, and form. I wanted this piece to have overtones of remnants of glass and charcoal wood. So I use a specific glass concoction that was compatible with each other to use or to make this specific aesthetic. Another series of work that I've been working on this semester is my Silent Forest series, developed after one of the earlier pieces, Gentle Reach, that I showed you earlier in my slide presentation. I wanted to create a larger scale, dark and cold forest installation out of steel. My vision for this installation was to create a scene that felt as if you were walking through a dead forest. So I started making stylized tree trunks at a larger scale with the intention to fill the space that these works would be shown in. This meant that they would spread out across the floor and they would stand from floor to ceiling. And then this is a in-process installation shot of our show, actually, of what will be shown this weekend. And then here's another detailed photos of, I have drawings in the background, as well as this piece in the middle, which depicts basically a fallen tree in the forest. Another thing that I've been getting into, and I see kind of going into my future, is I've been really interested with how sculpture and drawing kind of interact with each other without separating the two. So I've been having thoughts of bringing them together. Since I work with glass, I basically cut up a piece of mine and created this drawing that you see on the right out of graphite paper and glass. And then also, but also playing with other objects, taking away and replacing them with other materials, such as copper, is what you see on the left. What's in for my future? I'm going to Pilchuck Glass School to attend Michael Fletcher's neon course. I'm very excited because I have very little experience in neon lighting, which is another technique in glass that I am very excited to learn. Another thing that's in my future that I'm very excited about is, as Nathan mentioned, I am a new father. So after my show is done, I plan on spending so much time with my partner and I's little son named Huey. Thank you to all my family, friends, and faculty. The list that you see in this slide is just a short version of the long list of names that have helped me out throughout my CCA career. If you don't see your name on this list, you probably are there. So thank you all.
Thanks, Tony. That's great. Why don't you go ahead and leave that up in case we want to reference any of those images.
Sure.
Thanks, Tony. What a beautiful, like, very sculpture practice, and also such beautiful use of your different materials. I think something I really would love to hear more about. I'm not sure exactly how to answer the question, but ask the question, but the material choices for each of your sculptures, like if you'd go back maybe to the planting the seed piece, even one of those first ones, you seem to choose materials for their voice and what a sort of their contribution to what your work is about. Or then I'm thinking of the organic column piece. So you chose to use glass for the column and then steel for or bronze for the other. Could you talk about your relationship maybe in this piece and that piece to those material choices, and why I just was really struck by the way you used glass in this piece is such a beautiful, simple, it would be such a different piece if that was on, say, like a rod of steel. It's a very specific choice. And I'd love to hear some more about kind of your relationship to the voices of the different materials and when you choose what.
Right. Well, in this piece, I'll start with the glass. For this piece in particular, I like the ability that glass has to kind of, within its transparency to disappear. And that's kind of what I use the glass in this case. If it were any other object that was solid or opaque, it would kind of give it a different feel and its presence would be more known. and I'll try to answer the other portion of the questions. In terms of materials such as like steel, bronze, they're man-made materials, and so is glass. And so I'm intrigued with the dichotomy of the organic world and also the man-made world. And so kind of blending those two together through material and through form is what I find very intriguing, but also I like the confusion aspect of it, because based on my beliefs, I really do believe that humans have had a very negative impact on the world. And so thinking about topics like that and how these materials that I work with fit into those ideas is essentially what I'm after.
Awesome. And a term that has been really helpful for me in thinking about that over the last few years is human exceptionalism. Like, why do we think our rational minds are better than, all the other types of intelligence? And I think sculpture has a really specific role in that. It's such a material-based affect on that I think is, yes, cerebral and rational, but it's also very much body-based. And so speaking with materials that speak to the body, has an impact that also kind of, I think, can override some of our stupider parts. What Derrida actually calls bêtise, which is like the sort of the particular flavor of human stupidity, which has to do with our, just real belief that our rational consciousness is like the best thing, when actually it's probably what's destroying our species. So the themes are poignant and I think really important. And I'm really struck by your trajectory. I don't know if these were totally in order, but this show that you have up now, or the install shots of the, what's the title of the work? Lost in the Forest, or?
Silent Forest.
It's really beautiful, because I feel like the earlier work, it's a wonderful evolution, because there's sort of like an illustrated narrative to basically an invitation for me to come in and like be with those organic forms. So instead of like the head where I'm sort of projecting myself into that and it functions, in that way where I'm separating, there's this really wonderful kind of environment you're making. And I was curious, is there glass in this installation as well? Would you mind pointing out?
There is no glass.
Oh, awesome. Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So that's a big move too, if you've been so committed for so long.
Right. Well, I think the original iterations did have glass in them, but basically I let the material speak to what I want to speak. It's I constantly, through the critiquing process, I need to know what works, what doesn't work, and figure out the right combination of materials to use. In this case, it was just steel. I found that adding glass, because yes, you're right. Like glass is such a stronghold in my life that I think in terms of glass. But this was a great opportunity for me to branch out and to work with other materials and adapt necessarily, or pretty much. So
I really want to applaud your sensitivity to this, kind of my original question, or wanting to hear more about like your sensitivity to the material, the voice of the particular material. And here you are at the end of a, major in glass, having your BFA show with steel, because that's the right material for what needs to happen. And that, I feel like there's a courageousness in that, to let that be, to not sort of force the issue, because it looks, I feel like the drawings kind of hold the space for me in these pictures of what there's like a delicacy, and that kind of, are they drawings on the
they
wall?
are drawings, yeah. Graphite and gesso drawings.
really beautiful. And that kind of, you see what I mean? Like the voice of the glass and now the voice of the drawings you still kind of get that, that tenderness, or that, I guess it's just a tension with the steel, right? Like a different kind of, on the value spectrum of materials, like a lighter weight, and looks like a really gorgeous show. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Tony, can you take us to that piece that's, there's like a log at the bottom that's horizontal, and then I think it's called Gentle Reach.
Oh, gentle. Yep.
I think it led to this. That, in a way, that's probably
Yeah, this.
my favorite. I think it's because the shift in proportions between the twig coming out of it and the heavier log suggests a lot of other things, like a hammer or a foot or other things, but there's that proportional shift. So I like that. And I like that, in the last year and a half, I guess, I saw you really finish some of those works, like that piece that Welly was talking about with the cast head. That started out as those plaster heads. And you really dialed in the craftsmanship of those to make very finished works. And then it felt like, even though you had a very strong vision with the show, you were also willing to be nimble about like what's the best resolution for that, both in the terms of material and just, senior shows are oftentimes too full, and the pictures don't look like that. It feels like you had some restraint in terms of not showing everything you made, which I think is really commendable and brave. It's a natural thing to work really hard and then want to demonstrate that hard work by putting it in the show.
Absolutely.
And I really love those last two images you showed of the drawings under the piece of glass. Are they under the?
Yeah, they're under.
I think I'm imagining the scale of these, since it's not written, but is it like this big?
I'm sorry, I'm on an iPad. I can't necessarily see.
What's the diameter of those?
They are about 4 inches in diameter.
That was about, so a little, I mean, that is, I also think that tension of scale it's really exciting to me that you made this move to, you have this big immersive installation, right? Where everything's like a little bit bigger than human scale. But then again, that tension of then bringing my body down to the intimacy that can be had through those same materials it's a powerful move. I'd love to see those in the same space someday, if not this show, but in the future, so that I have that experience like in the same room, of my quality of attention shifting.
Yeah, I like the idea that like the natural world, it's such a big world out there, right? But it's still so precious, and I think we can't forget that. And so I think you're absolutely right. Like playing with the scale is important to speak about issues like that.
Mm-hmm. And even like the way complementary colors, show each other off in a different way. I think scale within a room of sculpture can do that as well. Like the larger pieces will actually increase that feeling of preciousness and intimacy, and with that smaller piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you, Tony.
All right, thank you all so much.
We're clapping and giving you emojis of celebration. You can't see.
That's right, since you can't see. All right, our final artist of the night and of the semester, Cheyenne. Welcome. Thanks. Cheyenne is actually going to stay with us in the fall because she's having such a good time that she's going to be back in the fall for one more semester. But because these artists are such tight friends and close workers, she wanted to do her show and the thesis conversations with her peers. So Cheyenne, way to get on top of things and get things done early. Nice job.
Thank you very much.
And also, you missed this part at the beginning, maybe? Oh, you were here. I was talking about the positive attitude, and I'll just tell everybody that if you have a hard thing happening, it's a good idea to have Cheyenne around because she'll bring the right amount of sunshine to the room. And I think you've done that for everybody in the studios this year. It's been such a pleasure to work with you. So why don't you take away the screen and tell us about your work.
Okay, thank you for the lovely introduction. Let's see. Okay, can all of you see my screen? I'm assuming yes, you can see my screen. Yeah, okay, cool. I couldn't see you guys for a second, so I had to pull it back up. Okay, let me just start my timer. Okay, hello, I am Cheyenne Giovannucci. I'm getting my BFA in glass in 2022. I grew up in both Lopakong, New Jersey and Regalsville, Pennsylvania. Lopakong, New Jersey is just a small town in New Jersey. I spent a lot of my time outdoors hiking with my parents, playing sports, gardening. And then my later years in high school, I spent living in Regalsville, Pennsylvania, which is so small, it's actually considered a village, not a town. And I put this little article because it's known for being an extremely haunted place. And I have a 3-year-old sister who, when she was 3 there, she used to say that she saw a man with no face, but he was nice, so it was okay, but it always freaked me out. And I am currently located in Sebastopol, California. I love it here. It is beautiful. It's the perfect environment for me to create my work. And then going into my inspirations, I've really loved Osamu Noguchi for a while now. I didn't find out about him until probably halfway through college, but there's a quote from him that I really like. You can find out how to do something and then do it, or do something and then find out what you did. And this definitely helped me kind of figure out how to instill a more playful nature in my making process and make things and allow myself to compose them into different compositions and find out what I did afterwards. Another inspiration for mine is the book American Earth. It's an anthology of a lot of the more significant American environmental writing from the last 2 centuries. I started reading this during COVID, and 2 authors that I really liked were John Burroughs, The Art of Seeing Things, and Wendell Berry, Nature of the Environment. And they definitely both have really interesting outlooks on nature and the environment and what it means to be within the environment. And then my last inspiration is one of my first favorite artists, Mark Rothko. His enveloping, broad, expansive landscapes have always been so admirable to me. And I would love to be able to encapture that in my work one day. So going into some of my older work, this is a little interactive table that I made earlier in my glass career at CCA. I really enjoyed its immersive quality, and it showed a lot of my interest in conversations that you'll see in some of my later work. This is a piece titled Becoming, and it has to do with my interest in the cycling of things and that there is no end. Everything is becoming new. This is a collection of domes. So last semester, I got kind of obsessed with the dome form, and that being a blank base to represent a person. And then so I would make a lot of domes and then compose them to show almost like a visual, to pull from for a visual language to show compositions of conversations. And then this is an example of what I was doing. So this would be 2 people working around a barrier in between them to communicate with each other. I really love this piece. I had a lot of fun making it. And then these are some drawings that I did for my show that I'm about to go into, but I came into CCA like a fully technical 2D artist, all drawing and painting. I had never really truly made something 3-dimensional. So this is my little show invitation. It's titled Determined to Become. And my statement for my show is, I surround a seed with the earth, determined by those before it, developing a system of support for that which blooms above. So this is a little far away shot of my setup. So I have these two little canvas dome cutouts and my title above. And then this is one of the first pieces in my show. I don't have studio shots of my pieces yet. I only have photos of them installed. But this piece inspired the title for my show, which is Determined to Become. I'm really interested in the passing of information from seed to sprout to plant back to seed, and tracking growth and the things that determine why we bloom and sometimes why we don't. So there's these glass tubes that are little bent sections, in a sense, tracking growth. And some of them, when they do meet the top piece of wood, there's a little sprout, like a clump of grass. And when they don't meet the top of wood, they just kind of stop there. And then I have some other photos of it from different angles just to try to give you a better sense of what it looks like. And then this is a piece titled We Need Support to Build. I've been thinking about this idea a lot in the last couple of years, especially through COVID, and just the human need for support, and with support, new can grow. And I have some little detail shots of this as well. This was a really fun piece for me to make. Just larger scale wood carving. This piece is a little bit under, I think it's like 4.5 feet, maybe 5 feet tall. So this was a really great time. And I like the little just like touch of glass that's there. It's not overpowering, but. And then, so I'll talk about these little sculptures in the bottom after, but the top part of this is a painting that I did for my show. And it's titled Behind a Conversation. I'm really interested, as you can kind of see, like what's behind what's happening, and why we maybe act the way that we do, why we have conversations the way that we do, all of the little things or people or family members behind us that are influencing what we do in a given moment. And this was fun, and you can't totally tell in this image, but the two front domes are actually 3-dimensional paper castings. Oh, here's a better photo so you can kind of see the 3-dimensional quality of part of the painting. And then these are two pieces that were, I showed images of two drawings a couple slides ago before I kind of started going into my show. And these are the physical iterations of that. So although I'm a glass major, I obviously work with a lot of other materials. And I really love casting, just the process of casting. And I knew I wanted to make these large stacks, and I knew that glass was not the answer to that, nor plaster or anything really heavy. So I kind of immersed myself into the world of paper casting, and definitely fell a little bit in love with it. I want to make everything out of paper now. And I think it's not what I imagined when I first drew what I was making, but it's come out to be a whole other thing in itself, and I'm really excited about it. But conceptually, these stacks are titled Support You, You Support, and they're kind of illustrating how in cycles, they've kind of become different, they have different meanings to me, but they started out as all of the past versions of you that build you up and also weigh you down. And then it kind of developed into that all the people that support you are also the people that you support. And there's this trade-off, and that if you are supported, you will be supported. And then I just have another angle photo of these. And then this is the last piece of my show. I was having trouble. I had a blank wall, and I had so many ideas of what I could fill it with. And my partner Tanner, who's a Cca graduate, helped me a lot with my show. And I drew him this little like thank you card with this watercolor on it. saying thank you for supporting me so that I can bloom. And I really was trying to figure out what I should put on this wall. And then I saw that and I was like, that perfectly kind of, it really shows what I'm trying to talk about in my work, but from my own little bit of personal point of view. So I made a 3 foot by 6 foot watercolor painting of it, and I really love it. Okay, so in the future, I will be also taking the neon class with Michael Fleischner at Pilchuck Glass School with Tony Hughes, and I'm very, very excited for it. And then I really enjoy wood turning, and I would like to learn more about it. And then all of my glass in my show is borosilicate glass that I've been more recently getting into working with, that I also really want to delve into. And I want to say thank you guys for listening to me. It's been quite the ride, but it's been worth it.
All right, thanks, Cheyenne. That was great. Can you reload your presentation?
Yes, I just realized I clicked out of it and I was like, wait, I probably shouldn't have done that.
So exciting to get to the end. You just want to be done. Yeah, thank you.
I am a little obsessed
Welly,
with the collection.
Some of these poems.
Uh-oh.
Go ahead.
Who's cutting out? Am I? Can you hear me now? Cheyenne, I'm a little obsessed with your collection of domes. Can we look at them again?
Yes, I just pulled them up.
Okay. To me, so I'm thinking of like Morandi paintings, you know, with he would just paint that same collection of vases and bottles, and we're doing what you're doing, of these objects becoming, you know, stand-ins for the individuality of each of us, but also the similarities, you know, and I love how different all of this particular collection. Like, I think it's such a great, almost like you're making a lexicon, you know, you're making a language for yourself, but the way that you discovered it, and then that Noguchi quote is perfect, just to kind of be like, oh yeah, I often will say, like, my art is smarter than me, often, you know. So if you let yourself do it and then you're like, try and catch up, you know, to what it's doing, that's so much better than you know, an idea would have had. I really love these. I think they're fabulous. I don't know if you ever would show them as a piece, but that would be a really fun partner to some of the work that has more narrative, just to have this little assembly, you know, of wildly different, it's like Star Wars figures, you know, like one from each planet. So they're really fun to look at.
No, totally. I've definitely thought about doing like photographs of just like every single dome that I've ever made.
Oh my gosh, a portrait of each one, like in a portrait studio, you know, just they're wonderful.
Thank you.
So that, and I thought of, have you ever seen Eva Hess's grid drawings? These like beautiful, tender drawings that she did. You know Eva Hess? Mm-hmm. Okay, so she did these drawings. I think they were on graph paper, but she might have made the grid. And in each of the squares of the grid, she drew a little circle. They're just ink drawings. It's like one of just a handful of artworks that I've just wept in front of. And it's just about the same thing. It's like each individual, they're separated, but they're together, you know, each time the circle's drawn. And I think you'd find them also equally as powerful. Something I wanted to ask you about, if you go to your the sort of show that you've got up now, you didn't talk at all about these totally vocally loud, strange PEDs that everything's on. Like, what are those made out of? Oh. What are they doing? You know, like every single thing is on these. I read them as, you know, sort of soil dirt piles that are also cast, but they have such a strong voice in the show. I'd love to hear you talk about them a little bit.
Oh yeah, that makes me so happy. So yes, they are soil. They're technically like a layer of soil that I've like wet. I got it wet and then packed it around the plinths that I built. But what I found is that it's a really similar process to me packing the paper into my molds for paper casting. And it really felt like I was doing like the same things over and over again. But you're right, I did totally forget to talk about them. But I really like the idea, in my little statement for my show, I say I surround a seed with the earth. And I like kind of, a lot of my ideas also go along with like the fostering of ideas. And if I'm planting my ideas and they're growing out of these mounds of earth, I felt like that really that paired well with the work and the ideas that I was talking about.
Yeah. And it's really fun to see to see all of the iterations. I'm sort of, you casually said, and so I made it into a 6-foot watercolor. Like making a 6-foot watercolor is no joke. So it's funny to sort of have that be, it's fun. Also, you talked about like being really grounded in drawing and not sort of much sculpture, right?
Yeah, not at all.
And just sort of, isn't that fun to like to see that sort of full circle? And then also sometimes like, I feel like the work is really about our engagement, and there's this narrative quality, like I'm reading. And so then to have also that highly personal moment in there, I think also does that kind of, we're talking about dynamics, of like having something really quiet and something really loud. Well, there's something that's like narrative and kind of conceptual in the reading of a lot of the work. And then this is almost like a personal love letter. And I think sort of shifting that language can also be a real powerful move in a space, again, just sort of shifting our attention and affect and expectations. And so again, I don't know if you guys are going to leave these up another week and a half, but really exciting shows. And they look, they all 4 of these exhibitions just look like such strong, finished, but still experimental artwork. And so good job, Cca. Good job, Nathan Lynch and all the rest. And Nathan, I wondered if I could see a little of your blob influence on these artworks.
I think they were rounded before I started working with Cheyenne.
Okay.
So I won't claim any credit for that, but I actually wanted to tell Cheyenne to look at your website, because I feel like when you were at CCA, you were making a lot of domes that people could actually put their heads into, right?
That's true. Yeah.
You have a fondness for domes.
Maybe that's why I felt that way about those little ones, right?
I think so. Cheyenne, great job. I haven't seen this work finished because you've been working so independently, which I'm proud that you can do that, and I'm delighted to see the work. But I've missed some of those in-between phases. Can you take us down a couple images to the installation shots? That piece, I mean, it's hard to describe without just fawning over you all, like the execution from the drawings you make several times to the little models that you make to getting to this stage. Can you make this image full screen just so you can see that a little better?
Gotcha.
These are really wonderful objects, and the kind of play between this, I love this piece, the play between the frame and these domes, which we've seen before in other places. And then the kind of structured whimsy of these tubes. And, under other circumstances, I would say, oh, it's really busy and hard to see. And that's true in a way. But I think your work actually sits pretty well with Tony's. And I know this forklift in the corner has since been covered up, but it has an interesting relationship in the show that relates to nature. So anyway, congratulations. I can't wait to see it on Saturday. And I want to just highlight that for all 4 of you, that this class has largely been about the question of like what next and how to get your work out there in the world, which is a central question at the end of art school. And I just go, oh, I'm still there. Sorry, my computer died for a minute. I can't tell if I'm live or not. Are we back?
You're good. You're good. You're here.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Woo. The cord wiggled and my computer went dead. Okay, my point is just that I don't know what shows or times you were originally assigned, but the four of you decided that time doesn't work for you. And so you went outside of the school's gallery system, and three of you are having a show together that opened Saturday, and Hana had her own show on campus, but on her own terms. And that's the secret there. Like, don't wait around for somebody to give you something the way you like, you know, the way it, you just go out and make the show for yourself. The students that I've had that have been most successful after school have made their own galleries and made their own opportunities. And so this evening and your show on Saturday and Hana's show feels like, you know, it gives me a lot of hope for you all leaving school, that you're going to be just, I have great confidence in your work as artists, because you went and made this happen this semester for yourselves. And that's totally on top of and outside of the quality of the work itself. So congratulations for that. What else? Oh, I want to just give you a little, I want to encourage everybody to go to Welly's website, which is wellyfletcher.com, and her Instagram is @wellyfletcher, which is more than just a promotional note for Welly, but if you look at her work, you'll see why I invited Welly tonight. And I think you could tell from the conversation that she's just a very smart and generous artist. So I really appreciate you being with us, Welly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really excited for you all. It's just beautiful work. Congratulations. And someone put in the chat, like, we made it. Oh, it was Hana. We made it through these crazy 5 years at CCAC. I mean, bravo. It was a time where people were not making things in person for, you know, significant amounts of time. And this is a really, really astounding quality and of craft, and then also just amount and scale of work. So great job.
Two more things that are announcements. Friday, we have this ceremony on the Oakland campus. I think at 3 to 5:30, we're going to welcome all alumni, students, staff, faculty, come and say goodbye to Oakland, which will be a hard moment and a celebration. So if you're in town, come join us, please. And the following day will be the opening for three of these artists, and I'm going to give you the address, and somebody else can type it into the chat. It's 5030 3rd Street in San Francisco, 94124, and it opens from 4 to 7 or 4 to midnight. We're not sure which, but come and celebrate with these artists. All right. And then anybody who's willing to play this game with me, you've probably seen people on Zooms do this thing where they go like this, like they're holding hands. Anybody seen that? Okay, so if you want to, turn your video on, but we're gonna try this other thing. We're gonna hold your arms all the way out, like you're putting your hands on the shoulder of the person next to you. Aside from like making your own shows, this is how you're gonna survive, by locking arms with your teammates and your partners. Look, our arms are all lined up. All right. Thanks, everybody. You did such a good job. So proud.
Thank you.
Thanks, Welly.
Thank you, Welly.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the
Thank you.
invitation, y'all. Congratulations.
I think so.
Hey, Nate. Bye, Nate. And
Ciao.
Ava, I'll send you the recording later.
Sounds good.
For your help.
Congrats, y'all. Take care.